Cool. So at this point, you have identified what the key skills are for this question. You've already done ample revision and preparation for the question. Now you find yourself in that exam hall under time conditions, and you've got that question in front of you. How on earth are you going to plan? Planning is one of the most fundamental things that you need to do for any question in English, mainly because it's a very quick way for you to plan out your line of argument, which is going to increase the chances that you will get more marks for AO1. So everybody needs to plan for their questions. Okay, we're going to go over a language change question here, and we're actually going to look at the essay that the student produced in a later video, so we can really break down how they got the marks that they did. So the question is, evaluate the idea that language change reflects social change. If you want to, you can write along as well. So when it comes to planning, generally in class, I give you quite a lot of time to plan, even before assessments in some cases. But you're not going to have a huge amount of time to plan in the exam, and you're certainly not going to have any of your resources with you. The only thing you're going to have is your knowledge in your brain. So, how do we tackle approaching these questions and actually planning them? Well, follow these steps, and they will give you the best kind of approach to doing so. So, first off, you need to identify the topic or the potential topics of the question. Remember, in the previous video, I said that evaluative essay questions could kind of blend multiple topics together. In this case, evaluate the idea that language change reflects social change. It's probably going to be mainly focused on language change itself. There isn't really any clear ways that you could talk about accent or anything like that. You could do, but I would say generally sticking to language change is a good thing for this prompt. The second one, how can this statement be looked at in two different ways? It's very easy to look at these questions and think, yes, absolutely, that is the case, or no, I don't know what on earth this person is talking about. But remember, we're evaluating. You need to write at least one paragraph agreeing with the statement and one disagreeing with it. So in the case of evaluate the idea that language change reflects social change, okay, yes, there is evidence to support this statement. This isn't a language change revision video, but it could be something like the internet, right? The internet was a massive social change, a big thing that impacted society, and therefore it also brought with it lots of linguistic change and linguistic variation. Okay, that could be my statement to look at agreeing with this point. However, we know that descriptivists argue that language change is random and is completely arbitrary. Therefore, it might not be social change that reflects language change at all. It might just be the fact that language change is random, and that's the end of it. So that's how I would look at this statement in two different ways. We're obviously just looking at a language change question here, but you need to apply this philosophy to whatever question it is that you're given. You need to be able to look at it in multiple different ways. What theory do I know of that I could apply to this topic? I assume at this point that you have done ample revision and that you can sift through your brain and figure out all the main theory that would apply to whatever question that is given to you. You need to dump that down in front of you so that you don't forget it, because the worst thing would be you think of a really good theorist and then the next minute it's gone from your brain and you can't think of it. So use any scrap paper that you have in the exam or anything to your disposal to just jot stuff down that you can refer back to during the planning stage. Okay? And the last one, this should be easier if you have followed my previous strategy of writing AO1 on your flashcards. What examples can I include in my answer to get some AO1? So we need to include some linguistic terminology rather than just theory. Okay? Now that works out quite well for us because we know that the structure of our essay is going to look like this. You're going to start off with an introduction, you're going to have 3 or 4 pairs, and then you're going to ultimately conclude your essay. Now, I'll talk about how to write an intro and a conclusion in a later video, but the main purpose of this video is to think about actually planning the meat of this essay, the actual pair paragraphs. Okay, so when it comes to planning, you can't really plan your introduction or write your introduction until you've planned your other pair paragraphs. You need to know where your essay is going so that you follow the correct kind of structure for your introduction. So park your intro for now. We're going to just focus on the pair paragraphs. Ignore the bit about Gretchen McCulloch at the bottom. We'll come to that in a moment. So we're going to plan our paragraph agreeing with the statement to begin with. So that was our point about the internet. Okay, so just imagine that this is your thought process, and this was my thought process when I came across this question. So I started off by thinking about the internet being a big proponent for linguistic change, and I thought about the examples that we looked at in class, and I thought up at least 2 or 3 examples for each so that I could identify a pattern. So we spoke about the fact that the word or the term hashtag came about from social media like Twitter and Instagram. That is an example of language being reflecting social change, but also there are patterns of neologisms or new words being created through things like initialisms, right? And I thought, well, that's great. That's good AO1. That's got us talking about patterns. But how can I then begin to link this to theory? Because there's no theory so far. And then I thought about emoji, those graphological things that we all use all the time. We did a little bit about this in class and we thought about the theory behind emoji use. So then I started to jot down things like Alexander Robertson. So Alexander Robertson said that emoji is a key way that we express our identity on the electronic mode. And he also said that emoji go through semantic shift, just as words do. So, for example, in terms of a word going through semantic shift, Google used to be a proper noun, but now it is a verb. It is an action to Google something or to search it up on the internet. So we spoke about this in class, like the crying emoji used to, was obviously created to interpret someone as crying, but now it's used to represent laughter. In some cases, it showcases laughter more than the regular laughing emoji, crying with laughter emoji, whatever. Okay. And then I thought about how we could link that to Gretchen McCulloch, because McCulloch said that emoji are popular because they replace those hand gestures and things that we use in the spoken mode to convey meaning. They are used as a replacement for that in the electronic mode. Okay. Now, obviously, this is me just dumping down information for a language change related question. I can't do a video for every single topic and every single question because that's just not realistic. But you can apply this same principle to any topic, any evaluative essay statement. Just sit and think about almost a logic, a formula that you could go through for each paragraph. Okay. Now, this is a lot of information for you to write down in the exam when you're just planning. So, if you already know this stuff and you're kind of thinking about it and you're fairly confident on it, then you can distill this down into a very quick and very simple plan. So it could look something like this. So literally, as you are scrolling down your plan, you could put paragraph 1, yes, because of the internet. Then you're talking about the patterns of neologisms and the patterns of new graphological features like emoji being created. Um, that's going to get you your AO1, quite high AO1 because of the patterns you've identified. You're then going to talk about your 2 theorists, which is decent. Ideally, you could get another theorist in, and this is actually where I would suggest that you incorporate another theory in the however section, because we're going to conclude our paragraph by setting us up for our next one. So our main argument here is that, yeah, language change reflects social change because of the internet. However, we know that descriptivists would say that language change is arbitrary, it's arguably random, and therefore it would change regardless of social change. And this is where you could start to bring in things like Hockett and Postal and Crystal with his tide model and various things like that. Okay? So this is a bit of revision for language change, but also it's a visual for you to see what your planning could look like for each of these paragraphs. Um, if you want to, you could have a look at the question here again and have a go at doing this yourself. So follow this sort of planning process for 3 paragraphs. And once you've done that, you can then go back to your introduction and your conclusion. And your intro will be very easy to write at this point because you've already identified what your line of argument is. Okay. Remember that you need to have at least 1 paragraph agreeing with a statement and at least 1 paragraph disagreeing. To get your 3rd paragraph, whichever you agree with more, whichever has got more evidence for it. Okay? Right. Good stuff.